I always thought the hardest moment a family could face was the loss of someone irreplaceable. I was naive. I had no idea the real weight of loss was not in death itself, but in how it exposes the fissures and ambitions lurking beneath polished smiles. That morning, I held my grandmother's hand in mine. Her skin paper thin yet unyielding, her pulse slow but steady as she exhaled one final breath into the dawn. I promised myself I would be okay, though the emptiness beneath her fingertips threatened to swallow me whole. I felt the quiet absence settle around me like fog. The house, normally alive with light, and the faint fragrance of jasmine tea seemed smaller, muted, as if it too mourned silently alongside me. By nightfall, everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love had dissolved. I found myself sitting in a leather chair across from the most meticulous lawyer I had ever seen. His presence imposing yet composed, the kind of authority that makes every decision feel fated. Before me lay a number, precise, cold, and monstrous. In its scale, $15 billion, 15 billion. A figure I had only seen in magazines, whispered about in boardrooms, and assumed belonged to others, not me. Not a cousin, not my stepmother, not my father. Me. The room narrowed around my chest. My father Robert did not flinch, did not tremble. He leaned forward, calm yet predatory, the kind of calm that hides storms. His voice was smooth, cutting through the tension with precision. "You'll sign it over tonight," he said, as if it were a casual instruction, not a demand that would reshape my life forever. I remember the exact sensation as my head shook. Slowly, almost mechanically. No, the single word felt small, powerless, and yet carried the force of a hammer striking iron. I wouldn't sign. And in that instant, the fragile architecture of my home collapsed. Before midnight, I stood on the porch with one bag in my hand, the wind tugging at my hair, the echo of my grandmother's house fading behind me. I was severed, cast adrift from a life I had barely belonged to, stripped of every familiar face that had once defined me. Morning came not as comfort, but as a test. I unlocked the gates of my grandmother's mansion, feeling the cool metal slide under my fingers. The gates groaned like a sigh, heavy with history, as if the house itself recognized the passage from one steward to another. I drove along the familiar driveway, headlights cutting through the early fog, heart hammering against my ribcage. Every tree, every curve of the road whispered stories of summers past, lessons imparted quietly, warnings masked as love. Before all of this, my existence had been quiet, almost invisible. I was Stella. In my father's house, I had been consistently peripheral. Not abused, not shouted at, not scolded in public, yet overlooked in ways that left marks unseen. Invisible bruises, etched on my spirit where others never noticed. My father's world revolved around control of image, career, influence, the people who orbit him. Love existed only as a commodity, exchangeable, never free. I had never been useful enough. I survived by shrinking. I worked, I earned, I kept my head down. I was small in a house where smallness was a survival tactic. My stepmother's smiles carried hidden knives, questions draped in etiquette but sharpened in judgment. Still at the same job? Have you thought about doing something more ambitious? Every syllable landed like measured blows. My half-brother Evan was blatant in his obsession. Money flowed from his words as naturally as breath. Investments, startups, acquisitions, he treated wealth as the only narrative that deserved attention. I had grown accustomed to my shadowed position, to being an afterthought in conversations, a placeholder in photographs, a ghost in my own family, and then there was my grandmother. Publicly, Margaret Harris was formidable, sharp-minded, a woman who could slice through negotiations with a glance. But privately, she was softness personified. Tea too strong, gardens humming with life, old songs hummed under her breath while her hands coaxed life from soil. She never measured worth by wealth, only by character. She asked if I slept, if I was proud, if I treated others well. She never asked how much money I had. I noticed her exhaustion when my father visited. He never came as a son. He arrived as a negotiator, a collector of assets, a subtle predator masked in familial guise. Folders, spreadsheets, quiet suggestions, hints of complaints, all delivered under the guise of concern. Afterward, she would squeeze my hand and whisper lessons disguised as advice. If anyone ever tries to buy your silence or obedience, walk away. Asterisk at the time, it sounded like guidance. Now I understand it was preparation. She was building an invisible armor around me, teaching patience, restraint, and strategy. Asterisk her health declined slowly, and I visited more frequently, not out of duty but desire. We spoke of life, books, human frailty, and the paradoxical ways love can wound. One afternoon she pressed a small brass key into my palm. "Just in case," she said. I laughed, dismissing her words, unaware of the weight I now carried. Asterisk her death left a chill that no heat could touch. My father assumed command immediately. Decisions flowed from him as if grief were a mere project to manage. I stood aside, invisible again, mourning quietly, resigned to invisibility. I believed life would resume its quiet rhythm. That illusion shattered within 3 days. Asterisk the reading of the will transformed law offices into battlegrounds. My name echoed, not as heir apparent but as an agent of disruption. The room became electric, charged with ambition, disbelief, and anger. 15 billion, designated solely to me, ignited something primal. The air thickened with tension. My father's calm facade cracked, revealing not sorrow, but the raw hunger for control lost. Asterisk that day I learned the first true lesson of inheritance. Wealth is not power. It is leverage, temptation, and a test of character. And I, for the first time, recognized the stakes clearly. This wasn't just about money. It was about obedience. Asterisk it was only the beginning. The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and cold leather, a scent that should have been neutral but now carried menace. Every surface reflected the harsh overhead lights, casting long shadows across faces lined with greed and expectation. The table stretched like an arena, polished mahogany gleaming, commanding attention even before words were spoken. Asterisk I entered, heart heavy but steady. Every step toward the chair at the end of the table felt like a march into the unknown. My father already sat at the head, as if the seat were etched into his identity. His posture was perfect, composed, controlled. He smiled politely, a thin line of charm that failed to mask the predator beneath. Linda, composed as ever, perched beside him, hands folded, posture rigid, eyes calculating. Evan lounged back in his chair, phone in hand, bored, dismissive, convinced. The outcome had already been decided. Asterisk I lowered myself into the chair, feeling the leather bite against my palms. Silence stretched, heavy, expectant. Daniel Moore, my grandmother's lawyer, cleared his throat. Calm, measured, calculated. Every syllable he spoke was precision, a scalpel cutting through the tension. Dates, revisions, witnesses, legalities, framed as ritual. My father waved his hand, impatient, as if etiquette could override law. "Just read it," he said, voice smooth but sharp. We all knew what he wanted. Instant control. Asterisk Daniel didn't waver. He opened the folder slowly, deliberately, each movement commanding focus. When he said my name, it hit me like a thunderclap. To my granddaughter Stella Harris, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all financial assets, properties, investments, and holdings valued at approximately $15 billion. Asterisk time stopped. My pulse thundered inside my chest. 15 billion? No cousins. No stepmother. No father, me, alone. Then the room erupted. What? My father's chair scraped against the floor, a sound sharp enough to startle. This isn't possible. His calm composure fractured. Linda clutched her chest, voice tight. It has to be a mistake. Evan's phone dropped silently onto the table as he finally looked up, face sharp, calculating. Where's my share? Asterisk I sat frozen. The weight of the number foreign, incomprehensible. It wasn't just money. It was recognition, power, and freedom rolled into one impossible figure. Daniel raised a hand, still calm. Your grandmother's instructions were explicit. Asterisk, my father's eyes burned into mine. You did this, he spat. The accusation? Barely hidden. You manipulated her, twisted her mind to take what belongs to me. Asterisk, I shook my head, voice steady though small. I didn't ask. I didn't influence. She made her choice. Asterisk, control. That word fell from his lips like a blade. His tone sharpened, cold, precise. I should be the one to control this fortune. Asterisk, Daniel leaned forward. Miss Harris, do you accept the inheritance as outlined? Every gaze bore into me. Every expectation weighed like iron chains. Asterisk, I heard my grandmother's voice echo in my mind. Walk away whenever they demand obedience. I lifted my chin. Yes, I said softly. Asterisk, silence fell. Not quiet, but tense, sharp. Electric. My father's expression morphed from anger into something darker, cold, measured, dangerous. This conversation isn't over, he said. I didn't know then how literal those words were. Later that evening, behind closed doors, the true confrontation unfolded. No witnesses, no politeness. Only the raw, naked demand of a man accustomed to control. He didn't ask. He commanded. Asterisk, come home, he said. We need to talk. As a family. Asterisk, family. The word should have been comfort. Instead, it twisted in my chest, tightening, warning me. Asterisk, I arrived. The house my childhood home felt alien. Lights blazed too bright, shadows sharp, corners impossible to ignore. Every lamp flared like scrutiny. He stood rigid near the fireplace. Jacket still on, posture exacting. Linda sat upright, hands folded as if perfect composure could intimidate me. Evan leaned against a wall, phone in hand, pretending indifference but eyes flicking to measure, calculate, predict. Asterisk, sit, my father commanded. I obeyed, silent, measured. Asterisk, you're going to fix this, he said, calm but lethal. Sign it over. Pretend this misunderstanding never happened. Asterisk, I swallowed. Misunderstanding? That was a lie too thin to hold. My grandmother had chosen. Asterisk, don't speak her name like that, he snapped. You know exactly what you did. You exploited her. Asterisk, I never asked, I said, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I didn't know the will had changed. Asterisk, Linda leaned forward, tone syrupy, maternal. You're not a bad person. You're just not equipped. 15 billion isn't a gift. It's a burden. Asterisk, Evan's expression sharpened, rolling his eyes. She wouldn't survive 6 months managing it. Asterisk, my father's nod was slow, deliberate, like a blade being sharpened. Exactly. That's why I offer a solution. He placed a folder in front of me. Sign it over. I'll give you 10%. Comfort, luxury, no pressure. Asterisk, I stared. 10%. A fraction of freedom offered in exchange for obedience. I spoke quietly, deliberately. You keep everything. I disappear. Asterisk, Linda's lips parted, disbelief staged as concern. You'll still be part of the family. Asterisk, Evan snorted, dismissive. As long as she behaves. Asterisk, I looked at the folder, at the blank space for my signature. I remembered her hands thin, warm, strong in her words. Walk away from anyone who demands obedience. I'm not signing, I said. The room shifted instantly. Calm evaporated. His eyes turned dangerous. You think defiance leaves you untouched? I'm not defying you, I said. I'm honoring her. Asterisk, he stepped closer. Whispered, walk away from this deal, you walk away from family. Asterisk, I met his gaze, pulse steady. You're asking me to surrender my life to control. I choose myself. Asterisk, the final words came like verdicts. Pack your things. 30 minutes. Asterisk, 30 minutes. A generous countdown for erasure. Asterisk, I went upstairs. Bedroom smelled faintly of detergent, memories of years compressed into faded walls. Closet opened. Clothes, essentials, some papers, nothing superfluous. Nothing meaningless. At the bottom of a drawer, my fingers found the brass key. Sacred, deliberate. I pocketed it. Asterisk, downstairs, suitcase in tow. He stood near the door, arms crossed, finality in his posture. "You're making a mistake," he said. I looked. Really? Looked. He wasn't angry because he lost a daughter. He was furious because he lost control. Goodbye, Dad, I said softly. The night swallowed me, cold and unforgiving. Linda's voice floated from behind the door. "Don't expect us to fix this later." The echo of the closing door felt permanent, absolute. I was homeless, cut off yet paradoxically free. 15 billion in my bag, useless against blood ties but priceless in autonomy. The mansion awaited. The key slid smoothly. The gates opened with groaning reluctance, a house awakening to a new steward. I drove slowly up the driveway, heart pounding, aware this was no longer her home. No longer my childhood home, it was mine to inherit, protect, and defend. Thomas Reed appeared, silent, commanding yet kind. Relief hit me so hard it nearly broke me. I wasn't alone. Not yet. Not while her guardians watched. For the first time since grief began, I realized being cast out wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a battle no one could dictate but me. Morning arrived strangely still. The sky above my grandmother's estate was a blank, indifferent canvas, as if the world refused to notice the storm brewing inside these walls. Inside, every nerve in my body was taut, waiting, alert. I stood by the tall windows in the study, watching the long driveway disappear into the shadowed trees. Heart beat loud enough to feel in my throat. Thomas Reed positioned himself near the front hall, statuesque, calm but alert. Every step he took was quiet authority, a reminder that I was no longer alone. Daniel Moore and Grace Wilson sat at the long table, folders and legal documents arranged with meticulous precision. Their presence alone was reassurance, yet a warning. This house and everything it contained was fortified against aggression. Grace checked her watch. "If your father intends to act," she said quietly, "it will be soon." I didn't need her to finish. Men like him hated delay. They hated being denied. They hated losing control. The first car tires crunched gravel. Then a second, then a third. My stomach dropped. I saw them through the window before anyone spoke. Black sedan. Sleek, commanding. My father led the procession. Behind him, Linda's SUV glided forward with rehearsed precision. Evan's sports car trailed, impatient and aggressive, like an afterthought forced into importance. "They're here," I whispered. Thomas nodded once, fluidly, without a tremor. "Stay where you are, Miss Stella." The front doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent, not polite. Thomas moved first, opening the door with deliberate swiftness. My father stepped inside without ceremony. "This is getting ridiculous," he said. Eyes scanning, calculating, claiming space as if each corner of the house were his birthright. "You had your moment. Hand over the keys and the documents." Linda followed silently, composure perfect but strained. Lips pressed thin, eyes sweeping the marble floors, the high ceilings, the shadows between columns. Her gaze said clearly, "This is mine by legacy." Evan whistled softly. "Wow, you moved in fast." His smirk was a challenge. I ignored him. I stepped forward. Hands trembling slightly, voice steady, deliberate. "This is my home now." He laughed. A short, humorless sound, devoid of warmth. "You don't know what you're saying." He advanced toward me, close enough to smell the faint cologne he always wore. "This inheritance is beyond you. You are not qualified, not prepared, not capable of leading this family's legacy." Daniel rose, voice firm. "Mr. Harris, I suggest you lower your tone." My father's glare turned toward him. "And I suggest you remember who built this fortune." Grace rose slowly, deliberate, her calm strength radiating authority. "Actually, Margaret Harris built it," she said. "And she left it to the person she trusted most to protect it." My father's jaw tightened. Tension radiated like static electricity through the room. He looked at me. Every fiber of control he had ever exercised felt suddenly meaningless. I took a breath, stepping fully into the space I now claimed. I didn't ask for this fight, I said. I didn't ask for the money. But I will not hand it over to anyone who tried to force me into silence. Linda scoffed. Listen to her. She's playing the victim. I met her gaze, calm but piercing. I'm not a victim. I am the person my grandmother believed I could be. I will not surrender that belief for obedience. Grace picked up the remote. The screen at the end of the room flickered to life. My grandmother appeared, seated in her favorite chair, posture regal. Eyes sharp and unwavering, Robert. Her voice cut through the room, clear, composed. Disappointment in every word, not anger. If you are watching this, you have already attempted to take what does not belong to you. You do not seek stewardship, you seek control. That is why you will never have it. My father froze. The confidence, the authority, the certainty gone. Before he could respond, the front door opened again. Judge Walker stepped inside, commanding presence, calm dominance. Robert Harris, he said. Any further attempts to intimidate or coerce Stella may be considered legal harassment. Given the trust structure, you have no claim to these assets. My father's face drained of color. He scanned the room, the documents, the screen, the silent guardians beside me, and realized fully that this was not a negotiation. It was an execution of will. Silence followed, heavy, absolute, the kind that stretches the lungs, makes the air itself seem brittle. Without another word, he turned toward the door. Linda faltered, her composure cracking, before following. Evan hesitated, fury and disbelief flickering across his face, before storming out in defeat. The door closed behind them, a final resonant declaration of victory. I exhaled, knees weak, but unbowed. Grace placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You did exactly what your grandmother hoped you would, she said. And in that moment I understood fully. My father did not freeze because of power. He froze because he realized it had slipped through his fingers entirely. I had inherited more than wealth. I had inherited authority, independence, and the power of choice. The mansion no longer felt like a house of memories. It felt like a fortress, a stage, a battlefield where I finally had the upper hand. And for the first time, fear released its grip. The mansion finally settled into a heavy, deliberate quiet. Not emptiness, but a presence, a new order had taken root. I walked through the grand halls, each footstep echoing against marble and polished wood, a reminder that I now owned this space. Every portrait, every artifact, every whisper of history was mine to steward, and mine alone to protect. Thomas Reed followed silently, his presence steady, unshakable, a shield I could rely upon. Daniel Moore and Grace Wilson remained at the study table. Folders open, pens poised, the architecture of legality stretched out in front of me like a battlefield map. Their calm authority contrasted sharply with the tension of the morning, yet I felt the weight of their watchfulness. Every decision now mattered. Every movement I made could trigger consequences that I had once been too naive to anticipate. I sat at the head of the table, the same seat my father had once claimed as birthright, and looked at the folders, at the contracts, at the legal structures that shielded me from him. The trust was labyrinthine. Every asset, every property, every portfolio secured by non-transferable clauses. Any attempt by him or anyone to coerce me would collapse entirely. The realization was intoxicating. I wasn't just protected. I was untouchable. Grace leaned forward, voice soft but precise. Your grandmother anticipated conflict, specifically from him. She knew exactly how far he would push. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of her words sink in. Everything had been orchestrated. Every precaution, every safeguard, every silent warning embedded within the estate, the will, and the trust designed to ensure that I, the quiet one, the overlooked one, would rise above the greed and entitlement that had always surrounded me. Daniel spread out sheets of paper, each one detailing responsibilities I had never imagined inheriting. Corporations, investment portfolios, charitable trusts, philanthropic initiatives, real estate developments. The sheer scale was staggering, yet clarity began to form in the chaos. My grandmother hadn't just given me money. She had given me power, the power to decide, to protect, and to redefine everything my father had taken for granted. I stood, moving toward the windows of the study, light streaming in, illuminating the vast grounds. The garden where she had once sipped tea in the late afternoon, watching roses shift in color as the sun sank. That was my inheritance, to the memories, the serenity, the quiet strength she had cultivated. I traced my fingers along the glass, imagining her voice whispering in my ear, teaching me that wealth revealed character. It did not create it. Thomas cleared his throat. You need a plan, he said, steady, measured. He will not stop trying, emotionally or strategically. Every weakness you show, he will exploit. I nodded, understanding fully.
He would attempt to manipulate, to guilt, to intimidate.
But he could not breach what she had built, not legally, not morally. I was armed, protected, untouchable. Over the next days, I immersed myself in every detail. Daniel walked me through investment strategies, legal responsibilities, and the delicate management of the family's public image. Grace explained the protective architecture of the trust, showing me every fail-safe, every contingency, every hidden layer designed to thwart coercion. My grandmother had been meticulous. I understood now that every document, every clause, every condition was a seed of silent revenge planted years before, waiting for the exact moment when her foresight would matter most. Each evening I wandered through the gardens she had loved. Paths lined with roses, fountains that whispered, quiet benches tucked beneath tall trees. I remembered our conversations, her questions about pride, kindness, integrity, and realized she had given me more than assets. She had given me permission to choose myself, to rise above fear, and to claim agency in a world that had constantly tried to define me as small, insignificant, replaceable. I began to make decisions. Strategic, deliberate, grounded in the values she had instilled. Education initiatives funded, legal aid programs for those threatened with financial coercion. Established, and projects designed to empower those silenced by entitlement and wealth. Every action was a quiet message to my father, my family, the world. Power cannot be taken by force. It is built by wisdom, patience, and integrity. One afternoon, sunlight streaming through tall windows, I summoned Daniel and Grace to the study. I don't want this fortune to exist just to prove someone wrong, I said. I want it to mean something. I want it to create strength, not conflict. Grace's eyes softened. Your grandmother would have been proud, she said quietly. I felt a calm settle within me, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past weeks. The battle had been won, but the real work had only begun. Wealth, power, control, they were tools, not victories. My grandmother had understood that fully. She had trusted me to uphold it with integrity, and now, I was ready. Standing alone in her garden weeks later, the same place where she had sipped tea, watched sunsets, hummed softly to herself. I understood fully what she had given me, not money, not titles, not authority over a family that had never truly valued me. She had given me clarity, perspective, strength, and the knowledge that some legacies cannot be stolen, only honored. The world outside continued in its chaos, indifferent, relentless. Meetings were scheduled, decisions demanded. The machinery of wealth and influence turned relentlessly onward. But inside me, something had settled. I had chosen myself. I had claimed my agency. I had stepped into a destiny I had never expected but had earned through patience, observation, and silent defiance. I visited my grandmother's grave one quiet morning, speaking aloud. I'm still afraid sometimes, I admitted. Still uncertain, but I am no longer lost. I am not shrinking. I am standing. I am keeping the promise you gave me. Her voice echoed in memory. Walk away when they demand obedience. Stand firm when they threaten. This was the inheritance worth more than any fortune. Asterisk as the mansion doors closed behind me that evening. I looked back at the glowing estate, the air full of memories, lessons, and quiet triumph. I realized finally, you do not owe your future to those who demand your silence. You owe it to yourself to stand firm, even when it costs everything familiar. Asterisk, and that was the real legacy. That was the inheritance worth defending for a lifetime.